Maybe I'll just, there we go. Okay, so here we go. So the team and profit. So this is a whole conversation that I think is really critical for companies to really pay attention to and engage in, I guess is the way to say it, because the whole team is important in terms of creating net profit for a company. Now, if you're a business owner, I'm going to try to hit this from the standpoint of, how do you get this across to your team? If you're a team member, I'm going to try to get this across in terms of what your part of it is. So I'll try to hit a couple of different angles here as we're going through. So one of the most important things to remember about people is we are all motivated by something. And one of the mistakes that a lot of business owners make is that they try to make their staff be motivated by the same thing they're motivated by. And so one of the things I like to do with companies is just ask people, like, what is it that gets you going? What is it? Why are you doing this job that you're doing? And quite often I'll say, it's dirty, it's messy, you get hurt, all kinds of things. And then I get the answers. And so here's a few that I've gotten over the years. Personal satisfaction, one of them. People will almost always say, I get paid. These are a couple of the funny ones. Stay out of trouble, weight control. And then somebody usually says, that only works for some of us. This is my absolute favorite, something to do while waiting to hunt and fish. And, we have a little fun with that. One of the guys at one presentation I was doing in the Washington, D.C. area, somebody said, I've got 4 kids. And I couldn't tell whether, he just had to get out of town, get out of the house, or he just needed a lot more money. And then somebody in Seattle said this, I want a cigarette boat, because they have those amazing races on Lake Washington every year with those big, powerful boats. But the point is that we all are motivated by individual things. But then we have to ask the question, why does the company do the job? And I know business owners have, they're generally very generous. They contribute to the community and all that kind of thing. But when you're thinking about a business, there really is only one reason for doing it, and that is net profit. Now, for business owners, you know what this is. For those of you who are not business owners, you just got to understand that net profit is sort of the leftover money. It's the money that isn't designated for anything except paying Uncle Sam and Uncle Virginia or Maryland or DC or whoever you're part of. And so taxes are going to come out of this, obviously, but net profit is that money that's left over. Now, why should we all care about this? Now, it's pretty obvious that business owners care because it's their livelihood. They get to share in or take some of that profit. They leave some in the company. They take some as part of their income. But as employees, why should we care? And so here's a number of the reasons why we should care. Job security. Let's keep the business in business, okay? We don't want to be going out of business. Perhaps it's increased income. If we have profitability coming into the business, then the business owner can share some of that either in the form of raises or in the form of bonuses. And unfortunately, business owners will often sacrifice the future by giving raises even when there's no income. So I'm going to tell the employees that might be associated with this training, if we're not making any money, it's really bad for the boss to give out raises every year. So we have to create the raises by creating the net profit. Personal satisfaction, I just get to help. Company growth ought to be funded by some money that's in the bank instead of borrowing. Now, I know there are sometimes because of tax advantages that it makes sense to borrow money, but in general, we want to have money to invest. Right now, we have a challenge in terms of people, right? We just can't find good people. How are we going to pay someone to learn? It's got to come out of that net profit. It's got to come out of a budget that says we have the money on hand. We just can't sacrifice to make that happen. Community recognition, like I said, I know a lot of companies are engaged in community recognition in big ways. They obviously participate in the community. Education and training, when we didn't have to be virtual, many companies would be taking their employees to a education day, to the remodeling show. It's supposed to be in Baltimore this year. It's going to be virtual. To the Journal Light construction shows. These are all opportunities for training and education, and they all cost money. And then finally, where it really meets the road here for us is we can buy a lot better tools. And whether that's a new van that we need for some aspect of the company, or if it's something like a very complex tool like a compound miter saw or something like that that makes us more efficient. So again, if you're a business owner, you understand this concept. For those of you who don't, net profit is what's left over after we've paid everybody. So we've paid the owner of the company, we've paid all the trade contractors, we've paid for all the materials, we've paid for all the things like dump fees and things like that. We've paid off the inspectors. No, we didn't do that. We're all legit here. So, but everybody's been paid. Therefore, we have some money left over at the end of the job. Now, I want you to be thinking a little bit about your personal spending habits as I go through this illustration, because very much the same way we look at money in our household, we look at it for the business. Now, a good illustration of this is business owners will be yakking at their team. You got to bring this job in on budget. You got to bring this job in on budget. But if you ask your team, how many of them have a budget at home, and when they get ready to spend money, they look at the budget and they see how much have I already spent for entertainment and how much do I have left, and I cannot exceed how much I have left. And I will just about guarantee you that none of them do. There might be 1 out of 100 that actually does that. Almost none of us run our personal lives by a budget. And so when our boss comes to us, or you as the managers come to your people and you say, you got to run this job by the budget, we go, okay. And then we just spend whatever comes to mind, because there is no such thing as a budget in any part of our lives. And so think about that when you're working with your team to try to get them to incorporate budget into the scenario. So just imagine that a company spends or makes $100,000 on a kitchen. Generally, the cost of that product, what we call production cost or cost of goods sold, COGS, is somewhere between 60 and 70%. And that's represented here by the 65%. There's this thing we call overhead. And in this illustration, it's shown at 25%. Now, what will happen, a business owner will get together with whoever their advisors are, and they'll say, we're going to spend X amount of dollars in overhead. And typically overhead is everything that the company has a roof over, like the office, all the people who work in the office, the rent, the toys, if you will, the computers, the telephones, all those things fit into this overhead category. And in general, overhead is a fixed cost for any given year in a well-run business. Now, if the business does $1 million and they spend $250,000 in overhead, that's 25%. If they spend $300,000 in overhead, that's 30%. And so as you look at a job by job, $100,000 job, $65,000 goes to the production cost, $25,000 goes to pay for all that stuff that's in the office, and we're hoping that we make a 10% net profit. Now, this line right here, try to make a seesaw out of it, but this, the 25% doesn't go up quite enough. But the point here is if this costs go up, it doesn't come out of the overhead, it comes out of profit. If we can bring these down, it adds profit over here. Now, very quickly, I want you to think about if your salesperson goes out, sells a job, $100,000 kitchen. I know that's hard in Northern Virginia, but $100,000 kitchen, we estimate that it's going to cost $65,000. We've got the 25% overhead and the 10% net profit. Everybody listening to this, do a quick calculation. If your team gets really efficient, how much can they save off that 65%? Now, typically, it's going to be in the 1 to 2, maybe 3% range, because in general, when we estimate jobs, we do not just throw a lot of extra money in there. Flip the equation. How much could you spend? And again, you're probably chuckling. Hopefully you're chuckling a little bit. And this can go up to 100%, and it can even go past 100%, depending on how it was estimated and whether it was estimated anywhere close to being accurate. The point here is, just like in your personal life, it's hard to save money. It's easy to spend money. And so the big point here is it doesn't matter whether you're a business owner or whether you're an employee, our task is to see how do we save a little bit of money. Now, these illustrations just say, you know what, if we could save 10%, look where it ends up. What happens if we end up spending an additional 20%? All that profit's gone, plus we dipped into the bank to help pay for the privilege of working on that person's house. So the point here is, how do we stay in tune with saving money? Now, very quickly, because I want to make sure I get through all these slides, overhead is what it costs to keep the company functioning. It's office costs, salaries, so forth like that, whatever's in the office. Quite often you'll hear people talking about GP or gross profit. It's not the same as net profit. What it is, it's the volume of work we produce or what we sold and built minus just the production costs. It equals the overhead and the profit. So for a $3 million company, if we follow the 25% rule, production costs are 65%, overhead is 25%, and net profit is 10%. So the overhead and profit is $1,050,000, and that's the gross profit. Net profit, very simply, $3 million company. There's the production cost, there's the overhead, and $300,000 goes in the bank. Production costs, very, very simply, everything that's included in what it takes to build the product. And then everybody needs to remember that if somebody's getting paid 28 bucks an hour, that's not what it costs the company. So if the company has a labor burden of 35%, and I think it would be good for employees to know what this is, but it costs the company $37.80. And as I will show you in a couple of very specific illustrations, if I can get to them quick enough, multiplied over day after day after day after day, that $9 is very, very, very significant, okay? And so you need to understand it's not 28 bucks an hour, it's $37.80 an hour in that case. Now, one of the illustrations I like to do with companies is just talk about how much does it cost for a company to function for 1 month. And so let's do the math. So 10%, what does that mean? Now that's $3 million. If you have a $3 million company, and I use that number because a lot of the companies that I work with are that large. If we can put 10% away, that's $300,000 a year. Now I'm raising my hand. I don't know if you can see it in the video, but I'm raising my hand. That's a lot of money. Okay. I would really like to have $300,000 in my bank account right now. But when you're looking at a $3 million company and you ask this question, how much does it cost for this $3 million company to function for 1 month? In other words, we're paying all the overhead and we're paying all the production costs. Here's how it goes. A $3 million company, 90% of it we're still paying $2.7 million a year. We're going to divide by 12. That means every month, $225,000 is being spent. Now, those of you who are really quick with this, you're looking 300, 225. And what that means is if you have 300,000 in the bank, it will last 1.3 months. Now, if you pay your taxes, which typically will be around 30% or 33%, it's not really 300,000. It's more like 200,000, and it's only 27 calendar days. So about 3.5 weeks of money. We spend an entire year trying to make enough money to keep the company functioning for 3.5 weeks in case a client doesn't pay the bill. So this is a big, big deal. For those of you who work for companies, this is why the boss will say, hey, when are you going to get that draw? When are you going to get to that draw? And you're going like, hang on, dude, you know, we're going to get there. And the dude is saying, no, we need to get there now so we can pay all these bills, right? That's one of the reasons. That's one of the reasons if you're a business owner and you're not making 10%, especially in the economy that's being driven right now, you need to make some changes because you need that money in the bank. Now, you probably need twice that just to be secure, right? And obviously you're going to pay some taxes on it. And obviously you want to do some good things with it, but get some money in the bank so you can cover these kinds of things. Now, I want to talk to you about the relationship between sales and overhead because this covers everybody in the company. The percentage of overhead is based on produced volume. We talk about volume of sales, but it doesn't really matter how much you sell. It's how much you produce that makes a difference. As volume increases, overhead decreases as a percentage if overhead real costs stay the same. So here's the example. Here's my $3 million company, 20% overhead at 600, 70% production costs at 2.1, and we hit the $300,000 10% profit. Produced volume increases by $500,000. Now, some of you are going to argue, wow, that's a big increase. It's not really. And I'll show you how or why that's so needed to say in a minute. But let's just say we can increase the volume of produced volume by $500,000. Our production costs stay at 70%. Obviously, we're doing more work. We're going to spend more money. Our overhead stays at 600,000. Look at the percentage, right? It went from 17% of 3.5 million from 20% of 3 million. And look what happens to profit. It jumps from 300,000 to 450,000. Now, just having some fun, which is better? Just say it to yourself, 450 is better than 300. Now, why we're trying to do $500,000 more, we're shooting for a 10% net profit. Why did this jump 150 instead of just 50? The reason is in that first 3 million, we paid for the overhead. So in the 500,000, the overhead and the net drop straight to the bottom line. And so the idea here is companies can improve their profit by improving production, getting more done, but keeping overhead fixed. Now, oops, I'm going to go quickly. This is obviously the opposite. For some reason, we missed out on $250,000 worth of work. Look what happened. We lost $75,000 because we didn't get around to producing and collecting $220,000 or $250,000. And so you can do the math yourself. It works across the board. It's a proven fact. All right. So we're not making money. We're losing money. Now, one of the questions, and we just don't have time in the facilities to ask a lot of, getting answers from people. So I'm going to go through my answers here. But what does your team have to do with being able to produce more work without increasing overhead? Now, this is not about the efficiencies of production. This is about getting more work done and not having to have an extra person in the office to support everybody. First thing is the more your team can take responsibility for the job site, the less managers we have to have. People ask me, when do I need a production manager? And I will laugh and say, if you have perfect lead carpenters or perfect project managers, you never need a production manager, right? But guess what? We don't have perfect ones. But the more perfect they get, the less support we need from the office, okay? Writing change orders that are completed during the jobs, almost everybody's brain is wired to, if we have 3 extra days of change order for a job, we add 3 days to the end of the job. If we can get those 3 extra days done during the original time frame of the job, it frees us up to do more. Profit or overhead and profit from that change order drops straight to the line. This is particularly effective with change orders that simply include a subcontractor, like building a deck or doing the roof or painting the outside of the house. Try to get that done during the original scope of work. We can increase our profit by increasing the amount of work that gets done that year. One of the things that I've gotten really hot on these days is making sure that design decisions that are sold during the job include the job disruption in mind. So again, a change order is written. We may include 2 days of work of labor in that change order. And especially now with materials and trade contractors being strung out, maybe that change is going to physically delay the job 5 days. Who's paying for those extra 3 days of overhead and net that we're losing? We are losing money during those 3 days. Who's paying for them? Now, you may not be able to get all the money in that change order, but get something in that change order. Train people. You got to train people. You can't find people off the street. Start training them because you're going to need them for more work. Customer service. Those of you who are out in the field and a client says, hey, you guys are doing a great job. What do you say? Thank you. Tell your friends, okay? That's a great way to bring in more work at the right margin. Ask for leads from clients, very similar. And then obviously passive marketing. How do you treat other people when you're standing in line getting a cup of coffee and you have logo wear on? Anybody, how do you drive? And business owners, you're in this pot too. How do you drive a company car that has the logo on it? Is it respectful of others or is it obnoxious? It's going to impact how much work you can do. And then finally, schedule and efficiency does impact this. I'm going to do this very quickly. If one person can save a half an hour a day on a job site, that adds 125 hours to the year or 15 working days. Or look at it like this. In a $3 million company, 250 working days, the team produces $12,000 of sold work per day. 15 extra days, that's almost $200,000 of work by simply being more efficient on the job site. Now let's talk about real production things, okay? Net profit is directly impacted by the changes in production. So here we have my nice, $3 million company, and we hit our net profit of $300,000. So instead of trying to do more work, the managers and the team decide, you know what? We're going to do the same amount of work. We're just going to get better at our production. And so right here, now I'm showing a 10% improvement just to show you how dramatic this is. You might only get 5%, but I'm going to show you even 5% is a big deal. All right. Production costs have gone down because we're doing the same amount of work. We did it at 60%. Overhead stays fixed at 600,000 or 20%. Look what happens to profit. So if you look here, 300,000, 600,000. This is a 100% jump in net profit with a 10% change in production costs. It's a 1 to 10 relationship. If you can save 1%, you get 10% improvement, which for this $3 million company is $30,000. Okay, that's a lot of money in my world still. Okay, A 2% improvement will give you $60,000 of improvement. And so if you can get 5, that gets you $150,000. So it is a huge impact to simply do that. Now, again, which is better? Well, obviously, the 600,000 is better. So what? For every 1% improvement in productivity, there's a 10% improvement in profit, net profit. Or, like I said, for the $3 million company, every 1% adds $30,000 to the bottom line. Now, this is just a huge thing. So for those of you who are managers and owners, we are not talking about beating everybody up to get a little extra income. And for those of you who are on the team that are listening to this, this is not about every time you go to the truck, you better run. And when you come back, you better have 2 hands full, because if you don't, you're being inefficient. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about thinking a little bit about the small things that change the dynamics drastically. Okay. Now, the bottom of the screen is blank. We've got the improvement up here. What goes down here? And unfortunately, a very grumpy business owner, because every 1% slip in productivity also brings a 10% slip in profit. And you remember, it's hard to save money. It takes work. It takes thinking. It takes doing a careful job of planning. It is not easy, and so it takes some effort. All right? So here's my mantra. Everybody's heard this before. Probably other speakers have used the same thing. It's not mine, but I'm claiming it for this presentation. Little things make a big difference. Okay? Now, I added some slides here for this presentation because I wanted to show you dramatically what some of these things are. I will make sure that the organizers have the presentation as it reads right now. The one they have now doesn't have these last slides, so pay attention. Change orders. How many little change orders do not get charged to the client, and what's the impact on the net profit? So look at it. So it's the little thing. So let's suppose somebody on the job site gives away a change order that takes about 2 hours of time, and cost to the client or cost to the company is $50 an hour. Now, everybody listening, understand that's not what somebody gets paid. That's what it costs the company. Now, for some of you in the DC area, it may be this is what you get paid. I just don't even know anymore. But bottom line, that's $100 in labor, okay? Let's say it takes $25 in material, which doesn't take a whole lot to spend $25 in material. We're actually going to double the labor because we're not working on something that's actually in the contract. Now, that's an important thing to remember. It's not $125. It's actually $225 that change order, that little thing that didn't get written as a change order, cost the company. Now, look at it down here. For a $50,000 job, that's almost 0.5%. One little thing, if it gets done twice on this $50,000 job, it's 1%. Now, the bigger the job, the bigger the opportunity for these little things not to be captured. So for those of you who are listening that are team members here, you need to capture every single change order, and the client needs to be charged for it no matter how small it is. It is a big deal. And like I suggested earlier, one time, not so big a deal on a 50,000. It's 0.5%, but every 0.5% adds up. And by the time you do 6 or 8 of these, it's 3 or 8 or 4%. Okay. So watch out for those things. Now, the other thing on change orders that I'm seeing is a big, big challenge for companies that are missing out on large sums of money is this allowance problem. in the contract, and it's particularly true with kitchens and bathrooms and big additions. In the contract, everything gets marked up right here, 50 or even 65 or 70%. So let's just say the original cabinet allowance is 10 grand. It gets marked up 50%. Therefore, the client is paying you $15,000 for the original cabinet allowance. They go out and select cabinets that cost $20,000. So there's an additional 10%. In your contract, you only mark those up 20%. Now, some companies are just brazen and bold, and they say, you know what? It gets marked up 50% just like everything else. But most companies have 1.2 as their markup for additional charges on allowances. So look right here. The extra amount, you're only charging them $12,000. Now, it's very quick, very easy to see. You have lost $3,000, okay? And that's all the rest of this is saying. The new sale price is $27,000 for the cabinets. The allowance was $20,000, marked up 50. If it was marked up 50, you'd be selling them for $30,000. Therefore, we lost $3,000. Now, just imagine that that's a $100,000 kitchen. Say it's a $200,000 kitchen. For a $100,000 kitchen, that's 3%. For a $200,000 kitchen, it's 1.5%. So you've already lost, right, the percentage that's going to put you in the hole underneath your 10%. And so the best thing you can do is make sure that your allowances are big enough to cover what the client wants to pick. Ask a lot of questions, figure it out, use your experience. Don't undercut allowances, because if you're in this category here, you're going to lose lots and lots and lots of money. Okay. Now, along with the change orders, this is primarily for the field staff. There's a lot of things that are said that really puts the client in the driver's seat, and you start losing money. So a client comes to a lead carpenter, project manager, and says, you know what, we'd like to add a bay window over here. We're going to miss out on some great views if we don't do that. The minute somebody says, oh, that'll be easy, or sure, we can do that, or no problem, what is the client starting to think? They're starting to think it's going to be inexpensive and it's not going to take much time. And so the thing that has to be communicated to the client as soon as they start asking for something is, yes, I'm sure we can do that. It will add more money to the contract and will add time to the schedule. Would you like me to see how much? So every lead carpenter, project manager needs to learn how to set expectations, all right? Now, another thing that comes up is, you know, something happens on a job and a lead carpenter, project manager will say something, you know, this happens on every one of our jobs. That's a key for the client to start digging in and seeing what they can get away with, okay? So you may feel it, you may think it, it may be true. Don't ever say it, all right? You've seen an unforeseen condition, and sometimes it pops out, man, I don't know why sales didn't see this, right? What's the client thinking? Oh boy, I got to step up here, right? So we have to be careful what we say. How about this one? Wow, that is a lot of money for such a small thing. And I use the illustration of solid core wood doors on a house. You know, that door may be $1,000, right? In the normal contract, because of the painting, because of everything that has to be done, that's probably $1,000 door, right? But in a change order, when you charge the client $1,000 for it, they go, oh my goodness, how could it be that much? And many of us react by saying, let me see if I can do something about that. You never want to do that. You always want to be confident of your prices and be able to assure the client, yeah, you thought it was a lot of money too, but you did the math and that's what it costs. And then what about this one? It just feels like you're nickel and diming us to death. Well, you know, there's this sarcastic part of me that wants to look them in the eye and go, you know, that $100,000 is a whole bunch of nickels and dimes, right? So, you know, but I don't, you know, but we just need to know, how do we answer things like this so that we don't give away the ship? There's three more things I want to just cover really quickly. Then we'll end up and we'll be open for some questions. Okay. So lumberyard runs, like, do the math. Okay. Because typically lumberyard runs, if I came into your company and worked with you, then, and you'd be telling me about the lumberyard runs, I would typically find that the lumberyard runs in your company amounts to roughly 2 to 3% of your annual sales volume. That's the average. I think I've been to one company in the last 20 years where it was under 2%. Many are over that. A couple of companies I visited, 7.5%, right? They could make big changes, but do the math. And here's how it works. We make 60 trips to the lumberyard in a month. They take an hour and a half. Now, I happen to know the Washington, D.C. area, and it could very easily be an hour and a half per trip. So that's per month. We're going to multiply it by 2 because what? We're not getting work done that's on the contract, the original contract. 180 hours a month times 12, that's 2,160 hours a year. We multiply it times that nice $50 an hour because that's what it costs us to do these things. That's $108,000 a year. Wouldn't you love to have $108,000 just to stick in your bank account? Oh yeah, I would, right? And for that $3 million company, that's 3.6% of annual sales, okay? So just get it in your head. Those lumberyard runs are huge in terms of cutting out profit. And it's the little things, right? So how do you deal with that? Better planning, better thinking of jobs through, those kinds of things. That's why I put it in the daily planning category. What about too many people on site? This assumed, now, let's just make it really, really clear that most of the time that second person on site is not 100% efficient. In fact, as soon as you add someone to the job site, it makes the lead carpenter less than 100% efficient, dragging down the efficiency. But just look at it this way. Assume that the second person on site is a carpenter and is effectively productive for half an hour, half of the day, which means we're only getting 4 hours of work out of that 8 hours. So the lead carpenter, and again, I don't think it's going to be 8. I think it's going to be more like 7 or 6 because we've added someone to the job site. But let's just pretend that they're 100% effective. They make us, basically cost us $400. I'm in the 100,000s here. $400 for that day. The carpenter costs us $320. Daily cost $720. Here's the real math down here. We actually only get $560 worth of production, or it costs us $160 for that. And then when you multiply that out, depending on the size of the project, if it happens day after day after day, then it becomes a huge amount of money in terms of the job. Now, making sure you have only the right number of people on site and making sure that your lead carpenters or your project managers know how to manage people is huge here. Otherwise, time gets wasted. And here's one of the ways that it typically gets wasted: extended breaks. Okay. Now, I know for safety's sake, a break in the morning is good. A break in the afternoon is good. And I didn't even include the lunch break, where people quite often leave the job site and go get food, then come back, and then everybody stops to eat, right? And that ends up being an extra 20 or 30 minutes on lunchtime. Didn't even include that. But 2 15-minute breaks cost the company half an hour or $50, and then it's $25 per day per person for this to happen, or times $50 an hour. If a break extends by only 5 minutes, right? Okay. That's 2 20-minute breaks a day, and that costs us $33 a day, right? So what is it? It's $8 per day per person, right? And then obviously what? There's some work loss. That 5 minutes that we did not work is lost work. So we multiply by 2. So it's $16 a day. Now, let's just assume it's the habit to let these breaks run a little bit longer. So if you hold tight to the 2 daily, the morning break and the afternoon break, but that lunch break extends 10 minutes, then you're into this category, right? So 250 working days at $16 a day, $4,000 per day per person. If we have 8 people working in the field, that's $32,000 a year if it happens with everybody. And if we're a $3 million company, that could be 1% of your annual sales volume. So it becomes a huge amount of money, these breaks. And, I met somebody one time that set their watch for every break and had alarms going off. That may be a bit extreme, but it may be what we need to do to make sure we stay on task and keep the breaks from lasting and going too long. Now, I encourage every company that's listening in on this to make your own little list, because the things that I shared are just examples of what I see typically all around the country going on in different companies. These are the common problems, but there's also other things that come up. Rework is another one of the things that comes up. Making sure the punch list extending for weeks and weeks and weeks becomes one of those little things. But what are the little things that in your company that if you dealt with, you would put a stop to some of the slippage that you have, and you would actually be hitting that 10% that you're looking for? So again, we've got about 10 minutes or so here for questions. If anybody has them, please enter them in the chat box, and I'll be more than happy to answer those. Just a little information about me here, this last slide. There's my email. I love to hear from people. If you enjoyed or you got something out of this presentation, please, please, please send me an email and tell me what you got out of it. My phone number is right there. That rings right at my desk. And unfortunately, 95% of the time, it's spam. So I'd love to hear from somebody that's not spam. In other words, when they say, do not hang up, right? And there's my podcast. An awful lot of what we do ends up going into these podcasts, try to help people be more effective in their production. And then I do a newsletter every week, or every month, that has something about production management as well as other things. So Trish Schroeder has asked, do you train everyone to be ready to work at 7 a.m. or whatever their start time is? Some people show up at 7 versus be ready. So yes, the short answer is yes. My problem is I'm an on-timer that believes that if you're not there 10 minutes early, you're late. Most people don't see that as their philosophy of life. And so what I've tried to encourage people to do is sort of split the difference. So you set up on your own time. In other words, you get to work, you set up your tools, you get ready to go, and you start working at your start time, which is 7 o'clock. Now, again, Trisha's hit a place where an awful lot of time gets wasted. Everybody shows up, they've got their coffee. The Washington Football Club played on Sunday, and everybody wants to talk about how terrible they were and how they ought to see. I know the culture in the DC area, folks, and maybe we ought to get rid of the owner and all these other things that I know you're talking about. And we're drinking coffee, and the work effectively starts at 7:15. But I'm going to tell you something, folks. Your time card gets listed for 7. So maybe we show up at quarter of, have our conversations, and we start right on time. And then the other side of it is, at the end of the day, the company pays for cleanup and putting tools away. So everybody, if you work 7 to 3:30, then boom, at 3:30, you're ready to leave the job site, and away you go. So that's my philosophy on that. I think it's fair to everybody. I remember talking to a project manager in California, had a big project going, and it had like 50 people working on the project, and they would be showing up. They were supposed to be there at 7:30, and they'd be showing up at 7:45, 8 o'clock. And so he made an announcement one day to say, I'm locking the gate at 7:30. If you're not in, you're not working that day. And it immediately changed behaviors. I mean, people were starting to show up at 7 talking, and then at 7:30, they were working. So it was a very dramatic sign that we needed to start the work right at the time that our work is supposed to start. So that is another one of those huge time sucks when it comes to net profit, and particularly the field staff. All right. Anybody else have any questions? Again, I would just encourage you, tune into the podcast. I am constantly looking for guests. We deal mostly with production related stuff, although sometimes we ventured into the business end of things. So if you have something that you'd like to talk about on the air that you think is kind of cool, something that you do that maybe no one else does, shoot me an email. We'll talk about it, and maybe we'll have you on. It's very, very simple. Or if you know somebody that does something pretty cool that you'd like to have them on, let me know and I'll try to get them on. So, all right, we're not looking at any more questions here. All right, so Trish keeps asking questions. So it would be great to have a checklist from the lumberyard of what can be ordered and delivered the next day. So yes, that would be wonderful. What we're finding, I think everybody knows this, not just me, is that even the stuff that we used to be able to get, in the next couple of days is taking time. So one of the things that I would advocate for is that before the project ever starts, the project manager or lead carpenter gets on the phone, makes a material list, gets on the phone to supplier or emails it in to your supplier. I know T.W. Perry is a big sponsor of NARI, and I certainly appreciate that. I used to buy from them quite a bit. I know there are other yards that people do use. But send that list in with a very specific question. Hey, Bill, what is on my list that will take me more than 2 days to get? And anything that Bill says, hey, pressure treated lumber is really tough right now. Trex is really tough right now. Other floorings, I'm sure, are really tough right now. But those are the two things that I'm hearing most about. Then you know that as you do your daily planning, right? So you do planning before the job starts. And then as you're doing your daily planning, you're ordering stuff far enough ahead that you actually get it when you need it. Okay, so very, very critical that you have information from the lumberyard that's current, not just like for the last 6 months, we've been able to get this in 2 days because we don't know what's going to happen next. Okay, so just again, this is for the project managers, lead carpenters. For those of you who are business owners, one of your big challenges is to get your team to practice effective daily planning. If they're not doing that, taking 15, 20 minutes out of the end of every day and thinking about what's coming up tomorrow, what's coming up, what's coming out next week, what about 2 weeks, what about 3 weeks, then you're gonna fall behind and you're gonna have people standing around the job going like, I thought the material was coming today. And anytime that happens, then of course you're just burning net profit, to keep warm, so to speak, because you're not being as efficient as you could possibly be. All right, everybody good? Trish, you have any more questions? All right, so I'm going to go ahead and stop the share here and turn it back over.
Actually, Tim, this is Trish.
Okay.
When you came into Schroeder and I was doing the scheduling and helping with production, you told me that I was not allowed to ask any questions. I had to let the production team do it because I asked too many questions for them. And that was a great lesson as a manager is don't talk.
Yeah, just to reinforce, one of my, what I think is kind of clever sayings is, if you'll do my job for me, I will let you. And so you never want to do somebody else's job for them. You want them to debug the plans. You want them to build a scale. I believe project manager, lead carpenter should dig into those plans and ask all the questions, because those are the ones that are important to them, and they get that job, in their head. They start seeing that job as as theirs, and they own it more. So I think you really want to make sure that they are doing the planning and putting those things together ahead of time. All right.
All right. Well, thank you, Tim. That was an excellent presentation, and
Well, thank you.
appreciate it very much. Just a couple of housekeeping issues here. We've got a message from another sponsor here.
For more than 2 decades, Home and Design Magazine has been showing DC area homeowners how remodeling can transform their homes into dream spaces. We publish these home makeover stories in 70,000 copies of Home and Design Magazine every other month. Our annual idea book offers sound advice and inspiring examples for creating a design vision and getting it done. Chesapeake Views stirs the imagination for everyday living, vacationing, or retiring in the Chesapeake Bay region. Our portfolio book showcases new work by 100 top local architects, interior designers, and landscape architects. The next issue of Home and Design will feature top remodeling projects. Let us know about yours. In fact, in every issue, a design build section shows our commitment to engaging readers with new remodeling stories and products. We hope you'll consider Home and Design as a good source of new clients for your business. Our focus on remaking home spaces has never been more relevant than today. At Home and Design, we are pleased to work with remodeling firms of all sizes to help you find your next clients. We have a program for any budget, so please reach out to us by email to sales@homeanddesign.com. That's sales@homeanddesign.com.
All right, just again, want to thank our flagship sponsor, Ferguson, and TW Perry, as well as the rest of our sponsors as well. And a reminder, please visit the expo room coming up here at 2:20. A lot of great prizes from many of the sponsors, and should be a great opportunity to win. So for every 10-minute expo room presentation that you view, you'll get one raffle ticket towards the drawing for all these different prizes as well. And then I would encourage you to give us your feedback. We'd appreciate. I think we're having some issues with the polling, so if you want to just shoot us an email with some feedback on not only Tim's session but the whole virtual education day, that would be much appreciated to help us plan a little bit more effectively for the future. And again, with that, I encourage you to stop back at 2:20, take a little break, and we'll begin the expo room. Thank you very much.